Hey, Pretty Girl Club. Welcome to the Psychology of a Femcel episode 4. So this is my sixth video on this topic. So be sure to check out my other videos on this topic if you're interested. But a lot of people, they don't realize that femcells do exist. But I want to say the way that I view a femcel is I kind of view it like it's an umbrella. And then underneath that umbrella, you've got the bitter women, you've got jealous women, you've got male centered women, you've got basic Betties. So I feel like all of those women are a variation of the quote unquote femcel. So when I use that term, that's actually not the perfect word to describe what I'm talking about, but it's the closest word that I can think of. So when I think of a femcel, I'm thinking of a woman who is a pick me. She's actually a pick me, but she just never got picked. So I think that femcells are different than incels because a lot of incel men really are involuntarily celibate because nobody wants to sleep with them. I don't necessarily think that's the case for women. I really do think that women could pretty much get sex from somebody somewhere if they wanted to. But I think the difference with femcells is that they cannot ever get the guy that they want. And because they are so male centered, they oftentimes take out their anger on the nearest woman. And I also think that a part of being a femcel can come from daddy issues as well. I've noticed an overarching theme where a lot of women with this femcel mindset, not only do they have internalized misogyny, but they also seem to have daddy issues, kind of a hatred of their own father. Maybe their father abandoned them, leaving them with these abandonment wounds. A good example of this was Zendaya's sister. I noticed that instead of her holding her father accountable or getting mad at her father for maybe not being there or treating them badly, she took out all of her frustrations on Zendaya, who was, clearly she was the daughter that was favored by this man. So that woman was actually still male-centered. She was male-centered because Zendaya got the attention from the man she wanted, which is her father. So this is why sometimes you'll have the dynamic of the jealous sister. It's because that sister, she's male-centered. She wants daddy's attention. But maybe you are getting more of daddy's attention because, your dad married your mom and then daddy didn't marry her mom. So I really think that no other content creator has done a deep dive into this topic. So we're going to dive into it today. One thing I've noticed about femcells is that they put beauty on a pedestal to the extreme. They have an obsession with beauty. So you would think that pretty women are very obsessed and vain. No, when I think of femcells, I'm thinking of women who are so desperate to be pretty that they are willing to rob people. These are the women who break into the beauty supply stores, they steal the wigs and stuff. They're willing to literally risk their freedom so they can have a chance at beauty or so they can have a chance at more beauty. These types of women are so male-centered to the point that they think beauty will solve all of their problems. And, I will be honest that when it comes to the male gaze, men are very shallow in general. So yes, men do gravitate towards beauty. But I have noticed that the femcel types of women, they have this love-hate relationship with beauty. So it's like beauty is this forbidden fruit that they've never been able to attain. It's this unattainable prize that they've never been able to get. And so some of them, they try to take shortcuts to beauty. Like I said, with robbing beauty supply stores, maybe stealing their friends' makeup. Have you ever had a friend in high school or middle school? She would steal your makeup. She would steal your nail polish. She would steal your clothes and wear them. That is kind of like this femcel psychology. So I don't necessarily think children can be femcells, but a lot of those women, if they don't grow up and decenter men, yes, they can become an adult version of that. So these women, they're desperate for beauty products. These are the women who may spend their bill money or they spend their life savings or they spend their children's money. Have you ever been around mothers who spend their baby's food money on getting a new sew-in? They get some new braids. They go and get some $200 acrylic nails instead of feeding their own children. So a lot of femcells, they pedestalize beauty to the extreme, to the point where it's actually very imbalanced. And this is where their inferiority complex starts to creep in, because imagine being so obsessed with beauty to the point where you are willing to sacrifice your freedom, you're willing to sacrifice your financial stability. And, when you come across a woman who is beautiful, these are the women who are willing to slash faces. They're willing to beat people up. because they want to sacrifice their freedom. They don't care. Nothing in this world is more important to them than being perceived as beautiful in the eyes of the male gaze. So femcels, they have this extreme fascination and obsession with beauty. A lot of women who are pretty privileged, a lot of us were just born pretty. So we don't really know what it's like to not be pretty. But for the woman with the femcel mindset, she tends to be a woman who either she truly isn't pretty or she just doesn't see her own beauty. She doesn't value her own beauty. And so she has this unending curiosity and this obsession with what it's like to be pretty. A lot of these women, you will see them in stan culture. So a stan is a stalker fan. So these are the women that you'll see in the Beehive. These are women that you'll see obsessing over like Ariana Grande or any female celebrity. They'll be obsessing over them. They might be following all of their Instagram posts. They may be like admiring them a lot, or they might actually be extremely jealous of that celebrity and trying to tear them down. Have you ever seen people where they make fake accounts just so they can go and like talk shit to somebody on Instagram? Some women will do this to women that they know in real life. Like, have you ever had a friend make a fake account, or maybe like your ex's new girlfriend or something? You know, she's stalking you because she perceives you as having more beauty than her. And because she's kind of got this femcel mindset on a subconscious level, she still has that never-ending curiosity about beauty. She has this obsession. It's like this lust. She has a deep lust and a deep desire to be beautiful because she wants the male gaze at the end of the day. A lot of these women, like I said, you have to be male-centered. You have to be a pick-me in order to be a femcel, because my opinion is that a femcel is really just a pick-me who never got picked by the guy she wanted. And so this is why you will see like women stalking their boyfriends, exes, or, you know, maybe they will start stalking. Oh my God, Hailey Bieber just popped up in my mind. She's actually a fantastic example of this. So the reason I'm thinking of Hailey Bieber is because she has an extreme pick-me mindset. If you're a Hailey Bieber fan, you may want to click out of this video. I actually did a whole episode on Hailey Bieber's psychology in my Patreon. So if you want more details on that, you can go ahead and subscribe to the Patreon. But she's a good example of someone who she doesn't see her own worth. She doesn't see her own beauty or value. So the way that she lives her life is to try to mimic the beauty of someone else, to the extreme though, to the point where it's like, okay, it's extremely obvious that you're trying to look like Selena Gomez. It's extremely obvious that you're fascinated with whoever your man perceives as beautiful. So do you see how it always goes back to the man? It always goes back to the male gaze. Her ultimate goal is to have the gaze of Justin Bieber. So any woman who he has looked at before, or any woman who he's currently looking at. So I heard that he just followed Sabrina Carpenter recently, and now she's like trying to dress like Sabrina Carpenter. So women with this femcel mentality, this extreme pick-me mentality, this obsession over the male gaze. Who does he like? Who does he want to sleep with? What types of girls does he like? Does he prefer light skin or dark skin? Does he like blondes or brunettes? Does he like boobs or does he like butt? Does he like tall, skinny models or does he like short, curvy women? So these are the types of communities that you will see the femcels in. So a lot of them have an obsession with whoever the pretty girl is. Oh, and by the way, throughout this video, I'm not going to include quote unquote femcel images. I'm going to stick to my normal imagery where it shows like beautiful women, because I don't want like the image of a quote unquote femcel to get into your psyche. So I'm always going to keep my images of pretty women on this channel for the most part. But a lot of women who are obsessed with beauty, they start to study whatever woman they perceive as having more beauty than them. And I've noticed that whenever you ask one of these women, okay, why do you think she's prettier than you? Oh, well, because she dates NFL players, and I've never had an NFL player hit on me. Oh, well, she's prettier than me because she dates white men, and I've never had a white man look at me. She's prettier because she got a wedding ring, and I didn't. You know, so they have all these random rules that equate to beauty, and we all know over here, this is a Decentering Men channel, so we know that, like, just because you're married doesn't mean you're prettier than someone else. But for women who have more of this femcel mindset, a lot of it is rooted in being a pick-me and internalized misogyny. So they really do have hierarchy thinking when it comes to beauty. So whoever they perceive as being higher up on a hierarchy than them, that is going to be their number one target. You actually hear some women talking about beauty hierarchies and literally following beauty hierarchies. you will hear them say things like, oh, I'm not conventionally attractive. That's actually a euphemism. So a euphemism is kind of like a kinder way of saying something. So a woman saying that she's not conventionally attractive, she's basically saying, I don't look like the normal pretty girls. I don't look like the normal pretty girls. I don't have the same body type as them or hair type or whatever. And so she's basically calling herself ugly. She's basically saying that she is socially beneath them. So a lot of women, watch out when you see these content creators saying things like, oh, well, I could never meet the Hollywood beauty standard. Okay, so she's got hierarchy thinking. She's got a Hollywood-centered version of beauty. And she is upset because she doesn't meet that standard. She feels like if she would have looked like a Hollywood actress, then maybe she would get Scott's attention. Then maybe she would get John's attention. So the women with this femcel mindset, it comes from this deep-seated rejection that they have experienced. So sometimes these girls actually are unattractive. Other times there's really nothing wrong with them. It's more so like a form of body dysmorphia, kind of like Hailey Bieber. So when you look at Hailey Bieber, you're not looking at her like, oh my God, she looks disgusting. No, she has this form of body dysmorphia. And then because she's so male-centered, it's kind of like stacking one trauma on top of another. So on this channel, we talk a lot about privilege stacking. And I believe that the opposite of privilege stacking is trauma stacking. So if you've already got some form of body dysmorphia coupled with being male-centered and being a pick-me, and then you see that your man is, following these women who look different than you, you're going to start to question yourself. And that leads me to my next point, which is that women with the femcel psychology, they have this external locus of control. That's why they're constantly looking outside of themselves, wondering what everybody else is doing. Okay, well, how is she dressing? How is she doing her makeup? How is she doing her hair? How is she losing weight? These are the women who they're obsessed with every detail of your life. If they perceive you as being the pretty girl, if they perceive you as meeting their beauty standard, they will have a fascination with you. This is why you see some women where they have all these pictures of celebrities and they will zoom in on their faces. They'll be like, oh, well, she got a nose job, or, they're trying to figure out her beauty. That's why they want to know if she got a nose job or not, because she's measuring herself against that celebrity. That's why she's obsessed with her nose. Something as simple as, imagine being so pretty that somebody is zooming into your face and they're zooming into your nose to see if it's different. Like, that's how high of a pedestal femcels place pretty women on. So they really will kind of stalk. It's more so like this stalking type of behavior, like a monitoring spirit, basically. They're monitoring your plastic surgeries. They're monitoring your hairstyles. They're monitoring who you date. Have you ever been around a woman who dates all of your exes? She wants all of your sloppy seconds. She had no interest in a guy until you had interest in that guy. Why? Well, it's because she's male-centered. She's a pick-me, but she never got picked by the guy that she wanted, and she wants what you want. She wants everything that you have. So if she sees that you want Johnny, suddenly she wants Johnny. She had no interest in him before, but Johnny is valuable to her now because the pretty girl wants him. So she's living her life externally. She's kind of following other people. And that leads me to my next point, which is that femcels in general, they tend to be followers. So they follow the trends. They follow what everybody else is doing. And this is why they get so upset about beauty trends. It's because they genuinely believe that they have to follow these Hollywood beauty standards. They really believe that they have to follow these body standards or these social media and Instagram standards. That's why they get so butthurt and worked up over it. It's because they really do think that it's going to affect their lives negatively. They have this scarcity mindset. And oftentimes women with this femcel mindset, they believe that everything revolves around the male gaze. Who do men think is the most beautiful? Who does Hollywood think is the most beautiful? Remember, Hollywood was created by men and it's owned by men. So it's still the male gaze, whether it's on a micro level or a macro level. So it's like, who does Hollywood think is beautiful? Who does social media think is beautiful? Why do they care about watching your social media? Well, it's because you have a lot of followers. In fact, I've heard some women talk about how if you have more than 1,000 followers, or if you have more than 2,000 followers, that means you're a baddie. And then if you have less followers, it means that you're ugly. I have never in my life thought of social media that way. Only a woman who has a femcel pick-me mindset would even think of a social media metric that way. So they have this tendency, it's almost like they have this OCD around beauty and beauty standards and the male gaze. So they start to create all of these metrics in their mind, like, oh, if I get 500 messages on Tinder, then that means I'm more pretty than this other girl. Have you ever heard women say, oh, yeah, I'm dark skinned or I'm fat or I'm XYZ disadvantaged and I got more likes than so and so who's white? And it's like, why are you even comparing Instagram likes? Why are you comparing Tinder messages? So they create all of these different metrics of beauty in their head because they are constantly fixated on beauty. Remember how I said that for a lot of people, the pretty girl, she is their standard of beauty, but she's also their standard of living. So that's why you have these women who are trying to date your exes. That's why you have these women who want to infiltrate your friend group because you're their standard of living. So if you hang out with the soccer team, now she wants to hang out with the soccer team. If you hang out with the people at the coffee shop, she wants to hang out with the people at the coffee shop. She's copying everything you do because you are her standard of living as well. So this goes deeper than just beauty. It's about the male gaze. It's about them having a particular standard of living that they don't know how to meet. It's also about a lack of social strategy. That is one thing that all women with this Femcel mindset have in common. They don't have a social strategy. And that really comes from not having a mother figure, maybe not having older sisters or feminine women. This is a women-centered channel, so I'm focusing on women in this episode. So part of that comes from not having a mother to teach you femininity or, to teach you about the different kinds of beauty so that you don't become delayed. A lot of women, they're emotionally crippled. That's another aspect of being a femcel. They are emotionally crippled. They're emotionally handicapped. So they never learned how to actually build self-esteem internally. They genuinely never learned how. So it's almost like they're developmentally delayed in terms of their emotional state. They're developmentally delayed in terms of their self-image. This is why you hear women, they're in their 30s and 40s, just now learning how to do their 4C hair. Just now learning how to do their natural hair. It's like, wait a minute, you've been on this earth for 40 years and you didn't even, 5-year-olds learn how to use brushes. You get Barbies when you're a little kid, and I understand that the Barbies have a certain hair texture. We can get into that. But again, that goes back to the parents. It is your mother's responsibility to teach you hygiene. Your hair, that's a part of your hygiene because, hair could get lice. You can get scalp infections and stuff. So a lot of women with this femcel mindset, some of them do also struggle with their hygiene. So, they're struggling with keeping their hair healthy and hygienic. They're putting stuff on their hair. Their whole scalp is breaking out. They've got all this contact dermatitis on their scalp. They've got boils and stuff on their scalp. They've got alopecia. They're just ripping and pulling their hair out because they haven't learned the basics of self-care. They haven't studied themselves because remember, they've got an external locus of control. So instead of studying how to do their own hair texture, they want to study how the pretty girls do their hair texture, whether it matches theirs or not. They want to study how you do your makeup. Have you ever had somebody go out of their way to just watch you do your makeup? They're very fascinated with you. They just want to watch you do your makeup. They just want to watch you do your hair. They want to watch you transform into a Barbie. So I know that most women do this in general because it's like, oh, I'm just inspired by you. No, but the femcel mindset, this goes way deeper than inspiration. It's a little bit more sinister. It's more so about monitoring spirits, wanting to monitor how you do your stuff so she can try to destiny swap with you. A lot of women who have a femcel mindset also believe in destiny swapping, whether they realize it or not. On a subconscious level, they wish they could wear your skin. They wish they had your body. In fact, some of them will even say it. I wish I had your body. I wish I had your hair texture. Your hair is so manageable. I wish I had your eyes. I wish I had your eye color, your nose, your lips. So if you're around someone who is constantly talking about how she wishes she was you, I would say to be careful because, there really is a thin line between admiration and just pure obsession. So what some femcels will do is start to develop bitterness over time. Have you ever heard certain women being called bitter all the time? Well, it's because if you go so long being invisible, feeling like the nerd, always being overlooked, always being second best, always having the guy come to you after he's been rejected by the other girls that he really wanted more than you. if you're constantly being downtrodden by your environment, and then especially if you're male-centered, so you've been rejected by the same men that you centered your entire life around. Imagine being 50 years old, half of your life has passed you by, and you spent it revolving around some men that never even picked you. This is where that bitterness comes from. That's a side effect of being extremely male-centered. And then, like I said, the follower mindset. A lot of femcels are also followers, I've noticed. So they think, oh, if I just have this baby, if I just get married to this guy, if I just go 50-50, if I just pay all his bills, if I just do XYZ, just follow the status quo, follow what everybody else is doing, then I'll be okay. Well, no, a lot of women, they realize once they hit middle age that they lost. They kind of lost all that time. They wasted their youth. Maybe they didn't recognize their own beauty, so they wasted their beauty. Have you ever heard of women who they're like in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and then they will tell you that when they look at pictures of themselves from 20 years ago, they realize finally, oh, wow, I was actually beautiful. Wow, I actually had a pretty skin tone. Wow, I actually had such long, healthy hair. I've seen a lot of women do this. Even in their 20s, they will look at their childhood pictures back when they wore their hair natural. Then they'll be like, oh, my hair was so naturally long and pretty back then. So a lot of women, they wasted their youth, they wasted their natural beauty, and so they end up becoming angry. And really, the anger is towards themselves, but it's also towards society as well. So this is where you get the women who feel like it's them against the world. They will give this talking point that everybody hates me. They'll say everybody hates them. They'll say nobody's there for them. Nobody cares about them. So it's almost like they have a chip on their shoulder. That's another common mindset that you will see in these femcel types of women, these pick-me's who never got picked. Because remember, men are also in charge of like capitalism. Like think of any ism you've ever experienced or heard of: classism, lookism, colorism, texturism, featureism, racism. All of these isms were created by men. So that's why some of these women, they end up becoming bitter because they realize, wait a minute, I was worshiping my own enemy this whole time. I was worshiping my own enemy. I was worshiping and putting somebody at the center of my life who wasn't putting me at the center of their lives. And so that's why they end up getting mad and stuff. So this is where we get into the basic Betty version of the femcel. So she spent her life thinking that, oh, if I just work this 9-to-5 job, then I'll become rich. So that's why she's getting triggered when she sees you, a young business owner, or, somebody who's kind of doing your own thing. You got a side hustle. She gets mad at you randomly. She starts talking you down and trying to convince you that you're going to fail. Why? Well, it's because she believed for 50 years that she would fail at starting her own business. So she spent her life as a follower. So that's why she's triggered by women who march to the beat of their own drum. She's triggered by women who dress how they want. I've noticed that's another big one. A lot of women, they spent their lives being a follower in terms of fashion, how they dress, how they express themselves, how they express their femininity. A lot of femcels actually have a negative relationship with their own femininity. That's why they can't cultivate it. That's why they have to copy you. That's why they have to watch your Instagram stories. That's why they're watching your Snapchat. They're watching everything you post on Facebook. They don't know how to cultivate their own femininity. They don't know how to express themselves authentically. And so they view you as their standard for their own identity. So that goes back to the whole destiny swapping type of thing, where it's like, they're trying to take on your identity. They want to talk how you talk. They want to use the same slang words as you. They want to laugh how you laugh. They want to smile in the same way. They suddenly change their hair color as soon as you change yours. They have spent so long having an external locus of control to the point where they don't even know who they are anymore. They don't know who they are. They don't know how to navigate through society. So they have to look to you as their guidance. They have to look to you as their reference point. And this brings me to the next aspect of a femcel, which is entitlement. She feels like the world owes her something because she has suffered for so long. A lot of women who feel like they've spent their lives being ugly, they want the beauty industry to pay for how much suffering they've gone through. So this is why they will tear down skinny women. Like have you ever seen the body positivity movement? It's actually not positive at all. It's actually quite negative because I see that a lot of them really just hate skinny women. They just hate women who are thin. they call them skinny bitches, and then they say they have no ass. They say they look like toothpicks. Okay, so that's not positivity. What's positive about that? That's no different than me calling you a whale, right? But women who had this femcel or kind of this pick-me mindset, and they kind of want revenge, I've noticed a lot of them have this revenge fantasy. So they have these fantasies about the pretty girl, losing in the end. They want the pretty girl to feel weak. They want the pretty girl who gets picked. They want her to finally feel rejected. So a lot of women with this femcel mindset, they tend to dislike pretty women. So it's like they worship and obsess over beauty, but when they come across a pretty woman in real life, they don't know how to react to her. Have you ever met somebody and as soon as she meets you, she doesn't know how to act? She's literally shocked. She doesn't really talk much. Maybe she was an extrovert before, but then suddenly when you come into the room, she's an introvert. She's as quiet as a mouse when you're in the room. It's because she doesn't know how to react to your beauty. She's never had that close of proximity to that much beauty before. And she also doesn't see the beauty in herself. So she's very externally focused. She's focused on you. So this is another thing too. A lot of women with this femcel mindset will do anything to be accepted. So not just stealing from beauty supply stores, not just slashing faces and beating people up, but they will sleep with their sisters' husbands. They'll do crazy stuff like that. They'll be extremely desperate for sex to the point where you couldn't pick any other guy. So out of the 4 billion men on this earth, you decided to choose your best friend's boyfriend. Out of all the guys you could have chosen. You decided to choose your sister's boyfriend. You decided to choose a man that's married. You decided to choose a man that's attached to another woman. Why? Well, it's because, like I said, she's got the external locus of control. So her sleeping with that man, it makes her feel like she's finally better than you. She's finally better than her sister. Finally, she's the one getting that male attention. Because like I said, they've got this deep-seated desire and lust. They're like this emotional vacuum. Like they're so empty inside. They will do anything. They'll cling on to anything and anyone to be accepted. And then it makes her feel even better to know that she got to sleep with the same guy that you slept with. That gives her a sense of accomplishment. Like, oh yeah, I slept with the same guy that was with my sister. My sister thinks she's pretty. Have you ever noticed that a lot of femcels, they're obsessed with what pretty women think? Oh, she thinks she's prettier than me. She thinks she's better than me. She thinks she has more status than me. She thinks she's privileged. She thinks she's cute. She thinks all the guys like her. It's like, oh my God, every 5 seconds, they're talking about what the pretty woman thinks. They're talking about what the popular girl is thinking. Why are they so obsessed with what you're thinking? It's because they're obsessed with beauty in general. They're obsessed with status. They have this lust, like not a normal version of it, but they have the more extreme version of it because it's so far-fetched to them to the point where they actually use it as an escape. So in their spare time, they daydream about what it would be like to be you. They daydream about what it would be like to finally get the guy. And so then, even if the only guy that's close to them happens to be her sister's husband, she doesn't care because she's like, look, I've always wanted a guy. So I don't care what guy it is, as long as somebody finally picks me. So they have this deep-seated desire to feel picked. Everything for them is about worthiness. So they want love because they want to finally feel worthy. And, some women, they feel like they're not worthy of love, or they feel like they will never receive love. So they will settle for sex. So these are the women who allow themselves to be used as, a cum dumpster, basically. So they don't mind being the cum dumpster to their sister's husband. They don't mind sleeping with random guys unprotected and, risking, like going through all this risky behavior, risking diseases, risking all kinds of violence, kind of risking their lives or risking it all just so they can have a moment of sexual validation. These are the women that you see where they are extremely overtly sexual and they're not being paid for it. So I'm not talking about ex workers. No. I'm talking about the women who are doing this for free. It's not even their job. They're just randomly sucking on a pickle at work or like somewhere where it's totally inappropriate, where it's totally creepy and nasty. Like it's literally harassment. Kind of like how you saw those women react to Aaron Pierre. They were like they were sexualizing him and stuff. They were sexually harassing him in the comments. So a lot of these femcel women who have never been picked, they're just so desperate. They're desperate for sexual attention. They're desperate for any kind of attention. It could be sexual, it could be romantic attention, it could be anything you can think of. And then when they can't get any of that, when they can't get the sexual attention, the romantic attention, or something from a man, they will resort to trying to get the pretty girl's attention. So sometimes, and by the way, this is a trauma response. You know how they talk about the trauma responses where it's like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? So fawning is one thing they will do. Fawning over the pretty girl, kissing her behind. You know, they will willingly be the pretty girl's sidekick just so they could have some form of attention, even if it's just the validation of the pretty girl. Or you will have the women who have the fight response. You know, that's one of the trauma responses. So they want to fight the pretty girl. They want to argue with you at work randomly. They want to send emails at work randomly. These are the clerks and cashiers. Oh my God, I can't stand this. These are the clerks and cashiers who work in the store. They see a pretty woman walk in, instantly they're rude to her. They say hello to every other customer. They don't say hello to you, the pretty girl, because, you know, they still are actually trying to get your attention, even if it's negative attention, because they're so invisible. They feel so invisible inside, to the point where they literally feel like a ghost. They're living their life as a zombie or a ghost. They feel like nobody sees them. Nobody hears them. People walk past them. Actually, these women actually will get mad. They'll say it. They'll say, you walked right past me. You didn't say hi to me. You don't speak to nobody. Well, you think you're better than me. You think you're prettier than me. Okay, so do you see how that was like 3 red flags already within that one paragraph? They're obsessed with what you're thinking. They're obsessed with getting your validation because they don't get any other validation. This is why I talk about micro validation on this channel. That is very important. You want to have internal validation, you know, self-validation, aka self-care, having good hygiene for yourself, you know, just kind of like making sure that you're well, you know, mentally, physically, spiritually. So a lot of these types of women, not only are they not caring for themselves, but they've now gotten to a point where they don't care for others. This is why you'll see them do these extreme things. And remember, Femcel, it doesn't mean she's ugly. It doesn't necessarily mean she's ugly, because I've noticed a lot of women with the Femcel mindset when it comes to quote unquote high value men. They're really not high value, but men who have money, men who have status, men who are basketball players, etc. So remember, my opinion on a Femcel is that she's just the woman who can't get the guy that she wants. It's not necessarily that she can't get any guy at all. No, she just can't get the NBA player. That's why she's willing to sleep with the NBA player even though he's married, because at least she gets a piece of him. At least she gets to say, ha ha, I got to sleep with so-and-so's NBA husband. Ha ha, I got to be with him. So it's like their revenge on the pretty girl. It's the fact that they want to get revenge on the girls who get chosen. That's what makes you her enemy. The fact that you have been chosen. You're the pretty girl. Maybe you got chosen to be the wife. You got chosen for the promotion. You got chosen by Hollywood. You know, you happen to meet Hollywood's beauty standards. You happen to have thin privilege or whatever the privilege is. A lot of women with this extreme femcel mindset, to the point where they have these revenge fantasies, they view your suffering as their like karma. They feel like that is satisfying to them. Like, yes, I got to see her suffer. This is why people are obsessed with the preference to baby mama pipeline. They talk about that on YouTube. Why do you care who preferences date if you're not like threatened by preferences? Why are you making so many videos about that? You know what I mean? Like, why are you so curious? And like, have you ever seen online the women who try to figure out a celebrity's boyfriend? Like, they want to try to dox that guy. They want to try to find whoever the guy is. They will accuse her of sleeping with somebody. And it's like, why do they care? Why are they investigating? Like, who has time for this? Who has time to try to investigate who this random celebrity is dating? The type of woman who fantasizes about being pretty, or she wants to see that woman suffering. It makes her feel good. Remember how I talked about my theory about how some women enjoy seeing other women being abused? Well, yeah, this goes back to the femcel revenge fantasy. They feel like, yes, she's getting abused. Ha, 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 ha. I didn't get abused. You know, so they'll literally brag about not having to experience the trauma of having too much of the male gaze. Because remember, I don't know why people think that men in general are safe. So it's like, okay, the women who are femcels, they forget that being around a lot of men or being chased by a lot of men is actually very unsafe. But then they will turn around and throw it in your face that you got SA'd. Like, haha, that's why you got SA'd. Haha, that's why you got put out at 2 a.m. by your baby daddy. That's kind of like their revenge fantasy. They have this femcel rage and they want to take it out on the pretty women. They want to take it out on the women who get picked. Those guys that complain about being short? It's very similar to that. They complain about being short. The guys that complain about being bald or fat or whatever, they'll be like, oh, women, they only want the rich guy. They only want the buff guy. Okay, femcels are the female version of that. Oh, well, he only wants a blonde girl. He only wants a white girl. He only wants a light-skinned girl. He only wants someone mixed. They're constantly focusing on what the opposite sex wants. And, they're mad that the opposite sex does not want them. In fact, go look at the YouTube videos. Go watch these women. They will talk about their bad experiences. And like I said, a lot of these women, they've spent their lives trauma stacking. So just listen to them when they talk. If you make a new friend and all she talks about is her dating traumas, like, oh, all these guys treat me like trash. Nobody wants me. Nobody likes me. Nobody gives me credit. That's another thing. They're obsessed with like being seen. So they feel like they've never received any credit. Credit just means you get complimented. People are shouting you out. If somebody's shouting you out, that gives you the opportunity to build clout. So these women are mad because they have a lack of social status. They have low social status. And so they get angry at anyone who they perceive as having more status than them. They get extremely angry. Some of them become like stalkers of those types of women. Have you ever met somebody where like they know your name and your birthday and all this stuff about you and like you've never met them? You don't even remember who they are? Or maybe you met them like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and they remember what you said. They remember what you were wearing. Have you ever been around a woman who memorizes your outfits? Like, oh, she wore that shirt 3 times this month. Oh, she wore that 3 times in 1 week, or she wore the same hairstyle. She's wearing the same exact wig that she was wearing last week. It's like, okay, you're memorizing somebody's unit of hair that they purchased from the beauty supply? Like, I've never even thought about something like that. That's the level of obsession that some femcels have because they're so empty inside. They don't have anything going on in their lives. They don't have anything exciting going on. So the most exciting thing to them is looking up who the celebrity is dating. That's the most exciting thing to them, looking up who the celebrity is dating. It's gossiping about you in the office. You are the topic of conversation because you're the pretty girl. You're the one on the pedestal. So a lot of women, they have this inferiority complex. That's another thing about all femcel women. They all have an inferiority complex about their femininity. In my opinion, they have an inferiority complex about their femininity. Part of it comes from trauma, like maybe being misgendered, maybe being masculinized. You'll hear certain women talking about that. They've been called men, they've been made fun of. People have told them they look like a man or whatever. So whatever bad things happen to them, they've actually internalized that. And so now they've got a bad relationship with their own femininity. They feel like no matter what they do, they're never feminine enough. Have you ever met a woman like that? The women who say you can't wear pants? The women who say you can't cut your hair short? They have all these random rules, once again. You can't wear pants, you can't cut your hair short, you can't wear certain things because, oh, that looks masculine, or, you can't be tall because then you're masculine, or you can't be too athletic. You can't have any muscle tone because then it's masculine. So they've got all these insecurities. That's really where a lot of the femcels are coming from. They have a lot of insecurities about their femininity. And so that's why they put all these limits on themselves. Like, oh no, I can't build any muscle at all because, then I'm going to look like a man. Or, I can't, I have to get a surgery to change my jawline, or I can't take pictures from a certain angle. I can't, just the most random stuff. Like, they will come up with the most random things that they perceive as making them look like men. And it's because they have a bad relationship with their own femininity. They don't believe that they are effortlessly feminine. So like for me personally, I'm always feminine. Whether I'm wearing shorts, whether I'm wearing pants, makeup, no makeup, short hair, long hair, blonde hair, black hair, lashes, no lashes. I've never thought about my femininity, not being received. But for women who are femcels, I also believe that their femininity has not been accepted by others. So I think it all starts in the home, though, like child development. I think that part of it could be their mommy issues. Maybe their mothers were not feminine, or their mothers discouraged them from being feminine. And then when they became a teenager and started to develop their own identity. They didn't. They didn't develop their own identity. They didn't develop their own femininity. They didn't realize what feminine archetypes they wanted to kind of like embody. They don't know how to embody their own femininity. They don't even know what femininity is. Ask women that you know, especially women that complain and say, you can't wear pants or you can't wear short hair. Ask those women, what is femininity? What is your definition of femininity? What do you perceive as being feminine or not feminine? Name items, name faces, name skin tones, name facial features, name heights and body types that you perceive as being feminine or non-feminine. Just ask them, and they won't be able to answer because they never had a clear definition of what their own femininity is. So, I believe that if you're a woman, you're feminine. But femcels, women who have this femcel mindset, they don't believe that. Because they perceive femininity as like, you have to be treated like a princess by a man. That makes you more feminine. Remember, they've got this male-centered mindset. They're a pick-me. So they feel like femininity is male-centered. So if I don't have a boyfriend, I'm not feminine. If I don't get likes on a dating app, I must not be feminine. If I'm not being hit on when I walk down the street, I'm not as feminine as Sarah. I'm not as feminine as this other girl, because she gets more male attention. So do you see how they always bring it back to men somehow? Once you listen to them, they always bring it back to men. They'll be like, oh, well, I'm not feminine because men don't hold the door for me. Men don't carry my bags. And what they're really talking about is actually feminine privilege. So I think there's a difference between being inherently feminine and then having feminine privilege, which is more of like an extreme version of femininity. And I talk more about that like on the Patreon and stuff. I have a couple episodes about that, but I just feel like YouTube is not ready for that conversation right now. So be sure to join the Patreon. But women who have this femcel mindset, they don't know how to interact in social settings, I've noticed. So I think a part of their insecurities with their own femininity is because they don't know how to go in and out of each feminine archetype, or they don't know how to go in and out of different kinds of feminine expression. So for example, I will name a common insecurity that some women have about their femininity. A lot of women will say things like, oh, I can't pull off a dress. I can't pull off the color pink. I can't pull off red lipstick. I can't pull off blonde highlights. Whatever it is, whatever feminine expression it is, they think that they can't pull it off. Well, why not? Why can't you have blonde hair? Oh, because I'm too dark. Okay, so you've got an internalized inferiority complex that is stopping you from expressing whatever version of femininity you wanted to express. So that's another common trauma I see in a lot of women who have this femcel mindset. So it's like, on the one hand, they've got all these rules and all these insecurities, but then on the other hand, they also still can't express their femininity. So it's extremely frustrating. Think of how frustrating that must be to never be able to embrace your identity as a woman. That sounds extremely frustrating. And that leads me to my next point. They are in a constant state of frustration. That is the main emotional state that they tend to be in. So this is why you will hang out with certain women and they're like a negative Nancy. They complain about everything. It's because deep down inside, she is a male-centered pick-me. She never got picked by the man that she wanted. Maybe she never got the marriage she wanted, or the sex she wanted, or the boyfriend she wanted, or the dates that she wanted. Whatever it is, she didn't get picked for that. And so now she's allowing that disappointment to spill over into her personality. So she used to be carefree. Maybe deep down inside, she wants to be carefree, but she can't. She has lost her spirit. It has crushed her spirit. Her experiences and her traumas have led to her being crushed. So now her personality is suppressed. Who she truly is, that's being suppressed. She's not free. She is living her life in bondage. She's living her life in shackles. She is emotionally shackled to her own traumas. She can't get over them. So now suddenly, she's a negative Nancy. So there's a difference between like having a bad experience and then having a straight up trauma to where it's like you have PTSD. So I feel like a lot of femcels, they have this extreme version of PTSD linked to their femininity, traumas in regards to their femininity, traumas in regards to the male gaze, traumas in regards to beauty standards, etc. And then maybe just the regular traumas of childhood, bullying, whatever. And so it's almost like this extreme version of PTSD to the point where now their whole personality is changed. So it's kind of like they're living in a state of shock. So I don't know if you've ever experienced culture shock, but I believe that a lot of femcels experienced culture shock when it came to men. So when they were a little girl, they thought that when they got older, all the men would flock to them, or maybe they've been watching all this content on YouTube, this hypergamy content, divestment content, whatever type of content, dating content, swirling, whatever the trends are online right now. They've been watching all this content, and they thought that when they went to the hotel, they thought that going to the Four Seasons and sitting at the bar, a billionaire would walk up to them and just start hitting on them. And so then when they do that 20 times in a row and nobody ever walks up to them, nobody says hello, then they become discouraged. So it's kind of like this extreme form of traumas that they have stacked up over the course of decades, to the point where it's like they're in shock. It's like they're in culture shock. And then they hear stories of their friends. Maybe they hear about you. Maybe you are dating a guy that's wealthy, or you are, you get the male gaze, but maybe you've decentered men because you have that option. You're not codependent. So you have the option to not center your whole life around men. Maybe you're just being carefree. You found another way to kind of enjoy your life without being like a pick-me. And so they're in a state of shock. They don't understand why their life isn't going the way they want it to go. But then at the same time, they're also angry that your life is going how you want it to go. They're angry that you are able to level up. And these are the main women who police other women's femininity. So it's like, okay, they are the most insecure about their own femininity. And then at the same time, they're also the biggest policers of other people's femininity. They want to call out when you got a nose job, when you got a weave, when you got a boob job. You got a tummy tuck after you had your baby, and now she wants to call it out. You got gastric bypass surgery, and she's mad. You got Ozempic or whatever, and she's mad because she's still obese. So a lot of this is linked back to them feeling insecure about their femininity, and they are insecure about their lack of social status, and so they get mad when somebody else is accessing that same social status that they've always wanted. So a lot of these women, I really feel like dark femininity would help them. Some people talk about shadow work. I don't consider myself to really believe in that stuff or be spiritual or anything. But yeah, kind of like shadow work, working on dark psychology, or ways to kind of finesse your way into the life you want. But a lot of those women, they can't do that. You know why? Because another aspect of being a femcel is actually good girl syndrome. So you feel like being the good girl, if I'm just sweet to everybody, if I'm nice to everybody, if I'm wholesome towards everybody, if I'm essentially a doormat with no boundaries and standards, then I will finally get the life of my dreams. I will finally be the princess. I will finally get the princess treatment. No, you won't, because that's not how life works. The majority of people in this society, they do not have those types of morals. Even if they are religious, they still don't even have those types of morals. Our society thrives on people who find loopholes, people who are strategic. So like I said, it all ties back to them not having been taught social strategy from a young age, not understanding how society works. They've been lied to, whether it's by their parents, by their religion, by their background, or they just never got taught anything. Nobody poured into them. Nobody mentored them when they were younger, so they were going through life with no guidance. And then they see you, and you're just effortless with it. Have you ever been around the type of woman who gets mad at how effortless you are? She's mad that you can wear pink and look effortless. You can wear a dress and look effortless. Then the next day you wear braids and still look effortless. Then you wear red lipstick. So you're able to pull off every type of femininity, every look she's ever wanted to pull off. You have the personality type that she envies. Maybe she's always wanted to be outgoing or, nice to people, being able to fit in different cultures and stuff. One of the main complaints that I hear from a lot of femcel people, they try to blame everything on racism. So it's if they walk into a room full of people and they're rude, they don't speak to anybody, and then, it's just a bunch of white people, and then the white people don't speak back to them, then they'll come back and say that those people are racist. Are they racist, or did you just not talk to them and you were just rude? And then you expected all of them to come and fawn over you. So a lot of women with kind of this femcel mindset and this lack of social skill, that goes back to being emotionally handicapped, emotionally crippled. They can't read the room. They don't know how to read body language. They don't know how to tell if somebody's open to talk to them or if somebody's not open to talk to them. They don't know how to tell if a guy is into them or something, because some women can have the femcel mindset and she's pretty. There's actually nothing wrong with her physically, but because she has like this body dysmorphia thing going on and she never feels good enough, a lot of those types of women have been around a lot of narcissists. So that's a whole other like video. But a lot of those women, they're constantly wondering, like, what is it about her? You know, what is it about her that makes her special? What is it about her to where she has the life I want? Hailey Bieber is popping up in my mind again. You know, it's like, what is it about Selena Gomez? Why is Selena Gomez so famous? She can't really sing like that. She can't really dance like that. So why is she so famous and I'm not? Why was it so easy for her? So these are the types of women who spend their lives trying to figure you out. Like if you're the pretty girl, if you're the pedestalized one, if you're the one that her boyfriend is following on Instagram or something, she is going to spend her spare time wondering what qualities you have that make you special instead of spending her time figuring out what qualities make her special. So again, that goes back to her external locus of control. She's constantly focused on everybody else. Well, how did she level up? Oh, okay, she's trying to date rappers. Oh, she's just trying to benefit off of colorism. Oh, well, Ice Spice, she's just trying to use her light skin and her being thick to get to where she is. Even if she is, how does that affect you? What's it to you? You're better off focusing on how you can level yourself up. But a lot of women with this femcel mindset, they'll never do that because they don't think there's anything interesting about themselves. That's really the root of it. They don't think that they are interesting. They think that the other girl is more interesting than them. And so for a lot of the exoticals on this channel, you are the interesting one. You know, you are her beauty standard. You are her standard of living. That's why she's spying on you. That's why she's watching what you eat for lunch. And she wants to know, what's your workout routine? How do you do everything? You know, she wants to know how you do everything because maybe she didn't receive a lot of guidance. So I would say, again, this could be harmless. It could be totally harmless. Sometimes women are trying to get out of the femcel mindset, and that's totally fine. But beware of the women who are not trying to get out of that mindset. And, you know, they're just trying to disarm you. One of the exoticals was talking in the Discord today about how some women, they start off complimenting you as a way to disarm you. And they want you to let your guard down as the pretty girl. And then they'll come in and destroy you later on. Like I said, these are the women who sleep with your boyfriend. You know, they sleep with your husband. And I'm not saying that the men are not held accountable, because obviously the men are held accountable. This is why I tell you, you should just decenter men altogether. But a lot of women, they will compliment you and they want to get close to you so they can gain intel on you. They want to learn what your weaknesses are so they can exploit those weaknesses later on. Anyway, what do you ladies think? Have you been raised by a femcel mother? Do you have femcel sisters, co-workers, cousins, old friends? Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.